Right, state may call its first witness.
Your Honor, the state would call Jenna Scurry to the stand.
Do you swear or affirm on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And before you begin, if you could give us your full name, spelling each of your names.
Okay. My first name is Jenna, Jena. Middle of Lee, Lee. Last name is Scurry, SC as in Charlie, URRY.
Mr. Frank.
Your Honor, you want the witnesses to leave their mask on or off? What's the preference?
Actually, I prefer you take your mask off so we can hear it, if you don't mind. There we go.
Thank you, Ms. Scurry. Can you tell the jurors what your occupation is?
I am a Minneapolis 911 dispatcher.
And so who is your employer?
City of Minneapolis.
And how long have you been doing that?
Almost 7 years.
Can you tell the jurors what kind of training goes into being a dispatcher?
A lot of training. We go through close to 2 years of training, starting with call taking, where citizens are calling 911 with their emergencies. Also speaking to non-emergencies and how we can direct those. We then work with police and fire on sending them their calls and prioritizing those, and also with the police officers on their off duties and warrants and lost children. So there's a multitude. There's about 4 different positions that we work.
Yeah, and maybe I should start first with, what all is involved in your job as a dispatcher? What are the kinds of things you do?
Specifically as a dispatcher, I take the calls that are from 911 as they are prioritized and send them out to the police officers or the firefighters to handle.
And do you also, for instance, have to answer, provide information out?
Yes.
Okay. And is this just for police calls or fire calls, or what kind of calls are involved?
We have 2 different dispatches. So we have police dispatchers who will take the calls from 911 and the information and give it out to the officers over the radio. And we have fire dispatchers who would then do that specifically for the fire department.
So there are kind of 4 different aspects to your job, right?
Correct.
What can you just describe first what those 4 really are?
The first one, 911 call taking, again, where the citizens would call in, giving their emergencies. We help with prioritizing those or getting them to non-emergencies lines. We then have fire dispatch, where those dispatchers specifically send over fire rigs to fires or medical runs. Channel 7 would be where we log in our off-duty officers, deal with lost children reports, warrants. It's called our information channel because it is a lot of where information questions happen. And then our police dispatching, where we take those calls from 911 and then send them out to the officers based off of priority.
So a lot of people think of a dispatcher as getting a call from somebody and then just calling a police officer and saying, go answer this call. But it's more to it than that.
A lot more to it.
Okay. And when you're working a typical shift, describe for the jurors what's around you. What's your office look like when you're a dispatcher?
My office, our center is currently located in a basement. We have walls similar to like this, covered with carpet. It's a large center. You'll have all the call takers together, similar to how the jurors are set, but you'll have 5 to 6 different screens around you. And then in another room, you'll have your fire dispatchers to give them some silence so they can work around that and be on the radio and listen to the firefighters. Across the room, You will have our Channel 7 that is closely located to our dispatch group, which is approximately 4 people that are giving out all the calls to the officers.
So when you say the fire dispatchers are somewhere different, why is that?
It's just the layout of our center. Police dispatch is also across the room away from the call takers. It gives them the ability to be louder if they need to, if someone's hard of hearing or anything like that. The chatter also gets, with everybody together, gets pretty loud, so we have our own different areas for the ability to be on the radio without all of the background noise.
So in any particular shift, there are some people taking calls and some people dispatching calls.
Correct. We are not doing the same. I am not taking a 911 call and then dispatching it.
Why is that?
Minneapolis is very busy. We have dedicated 911 call takers at that time. We wouldn't be able to do it all at the same time.
And then fire dispatches their own fire units for a particular call?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned having 5 or 6 screens in front of you. What are all those screens about?
Those screens have different resources on them. One of my screens is a telephone that has hundreds of numbers in it that I can use to call whoever I need to for any given reason. I also then have a city computer that I can utilize if I need to find an address because someone may not know it. I can use Google or any other resources I need from the internet. I then have a radio screen that has all of our radio channels on it, along with other public answering points, so we can listen to their chatter in case something is coming into Minneapolis that we need to be aware of. And then I have 3 screens dedicated to the calls that are coming in, the calls that are assigned to police or fire, and it'll tell me all of the units I have available or who is signed in for different things.
Sounds like a lot of information.
It is a lot of information.
How long did it take you to really become a master at your job?
Every day is a learning day. I can tell you that I can learn something new that I didn't know yesterday. To be completely comfortable with police dispatching, it took me about 3 years to get comfortable there.
And as part of your training for that job, did you have to learn about how the City of Minneapolis Police Department divides up the city for coverage?
Yes, that's all geography for us, based off of the precincts and then how the precincts break down into different sectors.
And can you describe for the jurors then, and by police coverage, and you're talking about how officers are assigned, correct?
Correct.
And so how is the City of Minneapolis divided up for police coverage?
There are 5 different precincts in Minneapolis, 1 through 5. Within those precincts, they all have different sectors. Those sectors are given to the officers. They have specific sectors that they belong to. And based off of the geography of the call, you would assign a certain unit to a different call, or to that call. And if you don't have a unit to cover that area, then you would have to take a unit from a different sector to cover that, leaving the sector they came from available.
So can you describe for the jurors, let's take, for example, the 3rd precinct. You're familiar with the 3rd precinct? And describe for the jurors generally what the 3rd precinct is.
The 3rd precinct has 4 sectors in it. The first one being 310. That is the top of the precinct. It goes down to Lake Street. And then the middle would be 320, and the lower half being 330, the east side being 340.
And so what generally in the area of Minneapolis are we talking about?
For the 3rd precinct would be
Correct.
South Minneapolis, east of 35W.
And when you use these terms like 310 and 320, what is that really referring to?
It refers to their sectors to correspond with the call signs that they use.
And so in a typical shift, how many officers would be assigned to each sector?
Typically you have 1 per sector, and then you have a sector squad or a precinct-wide squad that would be assigned to the whole precinct.
And so when officers are assigned to that sector, they're known by that sector number, not their names or their badge number or anything like that.
Correct.
So when you're dispatching, you dispatch to 320 because they're the 320 car.
Correct.
And so if you dispatch a call and that sector car is not available, what's the process there?
You move to that 360 number. It is a precinct-wide squad. If there is not one available, then you move to the most closest available squad.
So somebody has to go out of their sector to respond to that.
Correct.
And what's a priority call?
A priority call is a incident where someone calls in within 10 minutes of the situation happening, or there's the suspect that is still on scene.
So what's the significance of calling that a priority call in terms of dispatch?
The significance, we would want to get someone there as soon as possible. It's no longer, it falls still into the, how would I say this? It's still happening. There's possibility of the person still being on scene. It's not a report call that they would go not code to.
And so describe for us then what code 2 means.
As far as I understand, code 2 would be not using lights and sirens. They're going without those.
So it sort of makes sense for a call to be priority if you've got a suspect still there, want to get an officer there right away.
Correct.
And so code 2, from your training and experience, means proceeding without lights and sirens. Are there other codes that are used as part of the dispatch process and the policing process?
We have code 4, which would be scene safe.
Okay.
If we're working with other agencies, such as EMS, and they're staging in the area, which means they're not going in unless police have deemed it safe for them, police would let us know that the scene is code 4, and then they would proceed in.
And so between 2 and 4, is there a code 3?
There is a code 3.
And what does that mean?
Code 3 means emergent.
So
They need them as quickly as possible.
Okay. I'm going to back up a little bit. In your job as a dispatcher, you do a lot by hearing what's going on, getting calls. Is there also some things that you can do visually in terms of seeing what's going on outside of in the city of Minneapolis?
The majority of our job is all through listening. From the first call that comes into us to dispatching it to radios between dispatch and the responders. At some times we do have cameras available to us. They can be up simply for the fact to know what time of the day it is, to know what the weather might be out or at that time, to keep us as up to date so we can understand how or what questions to ask our callers depending on the day or what it looks like. But we do have cameras available to us if needed.
So explain where these cameras are. What do you mean that there are cameras?
As far as I know, they are around the city. I don't specifically know where each one of them is, but they are up and we do have access to them. Not specifically the dispatchers, but they are cameras that are available for usually camera operators, which are some police officers that operate cameras to use, and then we can use them as well.
So how do you see them, when you're working as a dispatcher, how do you see the video from those cameras?
Just like the TVs in this room, they're on the wall for us to use. There are approximately, I believe, 6 TVs.
And so it's a way for you to see what's going on out in the streets.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. And how often in your job do you think you look up at those and see what's going on?
It depends. Depends on how busy we are. Sometimes we are going from call to call to call, and you start at 5 o'clock and somehow it's already 9 o'clock in the afternoon, and you don't know how you got there. Sometimes we can look up and see what it's like outside, and you can watch the people walking by. It all depends on the day.
So in communicating with police officers who are out working, there are different ways that you can actually communicate with them and talk to them.
Correct.
What are the different ways that you can do that?
First, we use our radio. That is our formal way of communication with giving out calls and information. We also have our CAD system, and that is the computer system that allows us to take the calls from 911 operators. They come over to us at dispatch, and then when we dispatch the call, we're also giving that same call to the officers or the firefighters to their computers so that they have the same information that we're giving out. Through that, we also have what would seem as an email system, and we can use that to send messages to if needed.
Can you also make phone calls to officers?
We can.
And so you may have sort of already answered my question, but just to be clear about it, tell us the typical process when a citizen makes a 911 call, how that comes through the call center and becomes a call to police officers for assistance.
So everything is, the first question we ask is what is the address of the emergency? It's the most important thing so that we can send help right away if needed, but it also allows the calls to be coded to the correct dispatcher. We have 3 dispatchers working all at the same time, and they're in charge of different precincts. My channel, which was channel 1, is precinct 3 and 2, and the other channels involved have different precincts. So the address allows us to give it to different dispatchers so they can disseminate that information.
And so a call goes to a call taker.
Mm-hmm.
They give information to you to do the dispatch out.
Correct.
And so were you working on May 25th of last year?
I was.
Okay. What was your shift? Do you remember that day?
My shift was a middle shift. I started at 14:30, which is 2:30 in the afternoon, and I worked until midnight 30, which is 12:30 at night.
And I think you told us your responsibility then was which areas of Minneapolis?
Channel 1, which would be precinct 2 and precinct 3.
So then the other channels have the other precincts.
Correct.
And so what was your assignments? What were your job duties on May 25th of 2020?
As a police dispatcher, it was to take the calls that came in from 911 and to dispatch them to the police officers.
And incidentally, I think I may have forgot to ask you, is there always a sergeant on duty when you're serving as a dispatcher, a sergeant on duty out in the streets in each precinct?
Yes.
How many sergeants are there generally on?
It depends on their shift. Minimal of 1.
And as part of your duties, do you often have contact with those sergeants about calls and other matters?
Yes.
Now, on that date, May 25 of 2020, did you dispatch a call to officers to a location known as Cup Foods?
Yes.
And did you receive that 911 call?
I did not.
And but you dispatched a call about that?
Correct.
Are you familiar with that location, Cup Foods?
Yes.
And do you know the intersection where that's located?
38th in Chicago.
And is that in the city of Minneapolis?
Yes.
You know what county that's in?
Hennepin.
Okay. And why are you familiar with that location?
It's a place where I've been in the area before. Excuse me, sorry. And also it's part of our geography to know certain landmarks that stick out. It's a place where we have to be ready to understand where it is. So if someone tells me they're at Cup Foods, I know where that is. It's 38th in Chicago, and I can use my computer system to get that address.
Fairly familiar with the city of Minneapolis.
Yes.
And were you aware at the time if there was one of these street cameras for that area?
I did not.
Okay. Did you subsequently learn that there in fact is a camera there that could show the incident you had called?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, did you also then look at some video for this incident at that location?
Yes.
and we'll come back to that in a little bit. Prior to coming into court, did you have a chance to look at what we've marked as Exhibit 151? You don't know that, but it's the VisiNet or CAD printout from part of this call, correct?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, can we turn on just the witnesses screen, please? Can you put up 151, please? I'm showing you what we've marked as Exhibit 151. Do you see it on your screen?
No. Oh.
Now do you see it?
Yes, I'm using the judge's computer.
Okay. Do you first of all, do you recognize what this document is?
Yes.
And how would you refer to it so I get it right?
It is the printout version of the call
And
that it came in from 911.
so as calls are processed through the center, a record of that is made that looks like this.
Yes.
And is this kept in the ordinary course of the business of the call center and keeping track of what it does?
Yes.
And have you on prior occasions relied on something like this to recall what happened during a call?
Yes.
And is it something that you're able to see even sometimes during your shift?
Yes.
And would this come up on one of the multiple screens that you have if you wanted to?
Yes. Everything looks different. It would take a lot of explaining, but yes, we see all of this information.
Your Honor, then I would offer Exhibit 151.
Any objection? Your Honor, is that RT, Mr. Crowe, is that paid subject to review or started? No objection, Your Honor.
151 is received.
Now, Ms. Scurry, I'm going to ask for 151 to be put up on the screen so we can all see it. And starting here with the first page of this document, and I'll represent to you that we have not included the entire document, right? This is just a portion of that information, correct?
Correct.
So what I'm going to ask you to do here with the first line is tell us, run us through that first line and tell us the information on that very top line.
The first line is from the call taker. It is a query of the plate that's in the call, and then we use a lot of abbreviations for quick hand information to the dispatchers, and it would say outside on 38th Street reporting that there is a male provided a counterfeit bill to the business. The suspect is a black male, 6 foot taller, sitting on top of a blue Mercedes ML320 SUV, license plate boy Robert John 026.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this blown up a little bit so it's easier for everybody to read along with you. And at least the first couple lines, just so that it's bigger for us all to see. So the first column on the left, self-explanatory, that's the date.
Correct.
And then the time, also probably self-explanatory. What does user mean?
User would be how you identify different persons involved. This person, you can tell, is a call taker. It's the first two letters there, and then it has their ID number. We all have our own ID numbers.
And so what's your ID number?
Mine is 123096.
But this first user number that starts with a CT, you're familiar with who is assigned that number, or generally who has that number?
Yes.
And how do you know that?
It's given to our certain, everybody has their own specific one. If I needed to query that to find out who it was, it would tell me who their name is. But I also know that that's a call taker based off of the first two letters.
And then type, what does type mean?
It's the response.
So that's outgoing information.
Yes, I believe. I don't exactly know what that means actually right there.
Okay. So that first line, query, somebody's asking to run a license plate, correct?
Correct.
All right. So then the next line, can you describe for the jury then what we're seeing here, all that, if that's in capital letters?
So everything we write is usually in capital letters, but the first three letters are OTS. It's our short term for outside. And then just on 38th Street, it's providing the information of where. We try to be as clear as possible and paint a picture. So outside on 38th Street, reporting that there's mail provided a counterfeit bill to the business.
And so is this the information that the call taker provided to you to make the dispatch to officers?
Yes.
And as part of this process, does that information also go to the officers in writing?
Yes, all of this information is sent to them when they're assigned the call.
So this is available to them in their squad car as well?
Correct.
And we see then there's a description of the vehicle, correct? Blue Mercedes.
Yes.
And then there's an address.
Yes, that is the query information. That goes in there so we can, sometimes plates don't match vehicles. It is the reason why we ask, along with the license plate, what kind of vehicle are you seeing? So when we run that plate, we can say this is a stolen vehicle and it doesn't match, or the plate doesn't match because it might just be wrong.
So here, cleared at 2419 Ilion Avenue North, what does that mean?
That is the registered owner's address.
Of the vehicle that's described there.
Yes.
All right. And so then the next line, no screening questions asked, what does that mean?
Due to the pandemic, we have certain questions that we ask, and there were no screening questions asked based off of the person not being the person they're calling about. So the caller, as far as we know, they're not going to have contact with, but no screening questions were asked to let the officers know that we don't know if they've had any COVID contact or symptoms.
Okay. So then taking this information, then did you dispatch a squad car to respond to this call?
Yes.
And who did you, well, first of all, if you could tell us which sector of the 3rd precinct, I assume this was the 3rd precinct, correct?
Correct.
Which sector would this fall in?
This falls in 320 sector.
And did you, in fact, dispatch then to 320?
I originally dispatched this to 330.
And why is that?
320 was not available.
And you knew that from your work previous that day?
Yes.
Okay. And so then you, did you make an actual dispatch to 330 to respond to this call?
Yes.
And so when you do that, make that oral dispatch, you base it off this information that you're reading right here.
Correct.
All right. And prior to coming to court, did you have an opportunity to listen to a copy of that call?
Yes.
And we played that for you?
Yes.
And did that appear to be an accurate recording of the actual call that you made?
Yes.
And we've marked that as Exhibit 10. And Your Honor, we would offer Exhibit 10 at this time.
Any objection?
We're gonna
10 is received.
Can you play Exhibit 10, please?
2004, 23, May 25, 2020.
EFG to start as the only available out of your sector to Cup Foods on Chicago, 3759 Chicago. On 38th, they are reporting that there's a person who used a counterfeit bill at the business. Suspect is a black male, 6 foot or taller, sitting
just so we're clear, that's not quite the end of the call, is it?
No.
All right. We will try again and see if we can get the whole thing to play.
Mr. Frank, you want to take a moment?
So in your call out then, you passed along essentially the same information as in the written part we saw in Exhibit 151.
Correct.
Slightly different based on just what you're reporting out, correct?
Correct.
Also look inside record.
All right, so Ms. Scurry, thank you for bearing with us and everybody, but we'll try Exhibit 10 again. And just before we play it, so the first thing that records is actually not your voice. That's just an electronic voice marking the time of the call, correct?
Correct.
All right, so we'll try Exhibit 10 again.
T04-23, May 25, 2020.
At 3:30. 3:30, if you could start as the only available out of your sector to Cup Foods on Chicago, 3759 Chicago. On 38, they are reporting that there's a person who used a counterfeit bill at the business. Suspect is a black male, 6 foot or taller, sitting on the hood of a blue Mercedes. License plate Floyd Robert John 026, possibly intoxicated as well.
Copy. Squad 320, could you put this call in pending priority 9? We can take that forward, please.
Copy. 30 option, Chris.
Copy, cancel times 20.
So that is the total dispatch you had regarding this incident with the officers out on the street, correct?
Correct.
All right. So I'm going to back up and run through this a little bit. And if you can tell us, Cup Foods is in which sector?
It's in Sector 320.
Okay. And you initially called this out to 3:30, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall who was working in 3:30 that day?
I don't specifically know.
Okay. And so when you start your shift, you just know there's a car out there that's 3:30, you're calling to them.
Correct.
And after that, 3:30 called back and said copy, correct?
Correct.
And what does that mean?
It means they acknowledge that they've been given a call.
And subsequent to that, there was a call from 320, correct?
Yes.
And what was the substance of that call?
They said they would take their call.
Okay. So based on what you knew about 320 being busy, what did you take from that exchange that 320 was now calling in?
That they were able to at least put their call in pending and they could come back to it and then take their call.
They also mentioned pending priority 9. What does that mean?
That means that I didn't clear them from their call. Sometimes I will clear a squad for whichever reason. If it's report, advised, sent, there's a multitude of different reasons. And I instead just put it back in pending so they could pick it up later to finish whatever they needed to do.
And then 3:30 ended up calling and saying cancel, thanks 20, correct?
Correct.
All right, and what did that mean?
That they were no longer going to be going to the call. and to thank them.
And so when you're making, when you're doing that dispatch, at some point, did you ask to send additional officers there?
In the initial one, no.
Correct. But did you eventually?
Yes.
All right. So if we can go back to 151, please. And again, we'll expand that first page so we can see it easier. You'll see a line at 2010-08. So that would be 810-08, correct?
Correct.
And that's your identification number, correct?
Correct.
And so tell us what that line is about.
These are the actions that I did to back the squad 320 up with 330 and then 830.
And so when you're saying backed up 320 with 330, what does that mean? What do you?
Additional squads are en route.
And so did you request that, or was that information you got that they were going to back up 320?
I backed them up.
Okay. Do you recall why?
I believe, I don't remember specifically, that I heard something loud in the background and asked for additional squads until code 4.
And you did that as well with 830, correct?
Correct.
And what does 830 refer to?
Squad 830 is a park squad.
And by park squad, you mean what?
They're a Minneapolis park officer.
So it's the park police work for the city of Minneapolis as well.
Correct.
And so they can respond to calls in Minneapolis even though it's not in a park.
Correct.
And so then can you tell us a few lines down at 2011-02? Do you see that line?
Yes.
And describe for us what is listed there.
They are taking one out.
Okay. And what does that mean?
They are taking a person out of the vehicle.
Is that customary for officers to call that in?
Yes.
And then right below that is a license plate number, correct?
Yes.
And we have removed the identifying information from that, correct?
Correct.
That's why there's a gap there.
Mm-hmm.
And though there is a street address in Minneapolis, correct?
Yes.
And that's on Ilion Avenue?
Correct.
Where is that in Minneapolis generally, do you know?
That is in the 4th precinct.
So which side of Minneapolis is that?
That is on the north side of Minneapolis.
And so this information has gone out to the officers as well, that address.
Correct.
And then following down to 2012-21, do you see that entry?
Yes.
And can you describe for the jurors what's depicted on that line?
It is squad 320 is code 4.
And so that means what to you?
Scene safe.
And incidentally, this 2012 is military time. That's 8/12, correct?
Correct.
I suspect you're far more accustomed to translating that than the rest of us.
Very much.
Yeah. And then the next line down, can you describe for the jurors what's there?
It says 830 is out with squad 320. That is when the squad arrived.
That is when the, what, I'm sorry?
The 830 park squad is now with squad 320 at that location.
Okay. And then if we move down to the next line, a whole bunch of stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
Not really concerned. That's just all coding for some information requested, I assume.
Yes, that is 830 put something in the call.
Okay. So then we'll move to the next page, and we'll expand this so we can see it. And actually, these two pages, we'll probably pull up both at the same time so we can look at them as we go along. Drawing your attention to the second line at 2020-11. Do you see that?
Yes.
And can you describe what's listed there, what that line is about?
I believe I heard EMS code 2 for a mouth injury requested by the squad.
And so that's 320 calling in for that, correct?
Correct.
And so code 2, you told us earlier, means what?
Non-emergent.
And then describe for us then what's depicted in the next line at 2021-35.
Squad 330 requested EMS code 3.
So this is now
Upgrade.
330 upgrading the call to code 3. Is that yes?
Yes.
And so they're asking for the ambulance to come quicker.
Correct.
And just to be clear, when we talk about EMS, we might think of that as an ambulance, right?
Correct.
All right. And then the next line at 2027, 21, can you describe for the jurors what's depicted there?
It was information for the paramedics that police had the male restrained on the ground.
And incidentally, are you able to tell, who called that in, whether it was, or which squad it was?
I would be able to if I read the portable number,
Okay,
but I did not.
but not on this printout, correct?
Correct.
All right. So then, the next line down at 2028-36. Do you see that?
Yes.
Can you describe for the jurors what that line has there?
So we first start out with a different number, so the long numbers with all the zeros, and then that is a paramedic writing into the call, and it says rig 412 is requesting fire code 3, so we're adding additional agency to that.
Now explain why, is EMS different than fire?
Yes.
How so?
EMS, we have two different EMS companies we work with, North and then Hennepin County, Hennepin EMS. And this is them writing in here, adding the additional fire. Fire is clearly firefighters, but they are medically trained. They can be anywhere in the city close to within 4 minutes.
So this is the paramedics calling in
Additional support.
for support from the fire department.
Correct.
All right. And then if we skip down 2 lines to 2031-12, tell us what's listed there.
Per engine or rig, this is the paramedic rig 412. EMS is now located at Park and 36, so they no longer are on scene.
And so for those last 2 lines we've looked at, the EMS people are sending information to you or to this call center.
Everything's shared.
Okay.
So we have a shared computer system that we use. And when you start adding additional agencies, everybody gets the same information so that everybody can be informed on what's going on.
And so this information then as well goes out to the fire department.
Correct.
Is it a separate thing you have to do, or is it automatic as part of the sharing?
It is an automatic thing once you are adding the agencies.
Okay.
So fire would not be able to see that unless they had their own call.
And so the line above that is the multi-agency fire is adding fire in.
Correct.
And so skipping down a couple lines now to 2033-02, can you describe for the jurors what's in that line?
It says via Metcom, EMS would like the fire department for patient condition at the requested location.
And this is something you dispatched out.
Correct.
And so that's, what's the import of this information? What's being communicated here?
I no longer knew what was going on. And I asked our partners, our agency, other agencies, via Metcom. It is a resource group that we have that we can connect radio to radio instead of phone to phone. It's faster. And I asked them what was going on, and that's what they told me, so I put it in the call so that everybody had that information.
And the next line down at 2034-10, can you describe where that information is coming from?
It's coming from the paramedics, and it says full arrest.
Okay. So that's something they're reporting into this our shared system, full arrest.
Correct.
All right. And the next line after that, 2034-30.
Again, coming from paramedics, or they said engine or rig 412, the paramedics are working a full arrest.
And the next line down again now is you calling in, or you handling this information, correct?
Yes.
And what are you dispatching out there?
Adding information that the fire department is en route to Park and 36.
And then the next line down, 203607.
That is a different ID number, and it starts with F, which means it's coming from one of our fire dispatchers. It says engine 17, fire's 2 minutes out to 36 Then Park.
And the next line down, if you could just describe that for the jurors, the 204823.
That is EMS transporting to HCMC.
And then finally, this last line, 205506, in the column after the time, 3:30, correct?
Yes.
So what does that mean with that code being there?
The information that they provided,
Right, so is this 3:30 calling in?
they didn't call in. This is information they put directly into the call.
All right, how do they do that? What is
They
it?
have their computers. It's a laptop, I believe, in their cars that they're able to provide information that way too.
And so on this line, it references the status of the AP. Do you recognize the abbreviation AP?
No,
You don't know what that refers to?
no.
Okay. And so this is really a timeline of what happened during these calls, correct?
Correct.
So during this call, you know why we're here today, of course, because of this incident, correct?
Correct.
You have since learned the identities of the officers involved.
Correct.
On May 25th of 2020, did you personally know any of those officers?
No.
And during this time of this call, did you have some opportunities to look at the street video from this location?
I did.
And can you describe for the jurors how you came to see that?
While working at my position, we have 2 cameras or 2 TVs on our walls, one on both sides of the walls, so either side of the room can see. While I was dispatching calls, because this call was not the only call that I had to dispatch to officers in different precincts, I noticed that the cameras were up at 38th in Chicago and that we were able to see what was going on.
And did you recognize what was depicted in the video?
To the best of my knowledge,
And was Cup Foods in the video?
yes.
And did you recognize that as Cup Foods?
Yes.
Was that consistent with what you knew to be 38th in Chicago?
Yes.
And so did you also, when you observed that, see some police officers?
Yes.
And can you just describe when you first looked up there in general kind of what you saw?
When I just saw the squad car. I didn't see the police officers.
And did you watch this video feed for a period of time?
I went in and out of the camera and being able to pay attention to it. I did not watch the whole video. Or as it was happening, I did not watch the whole time.
And why not?
I still had calls to take care of and things to give out to the police officers.
So we've marked a copy of that video. Did you have a chance to view that before coming into court today?
Yes.
And you understand that we cropped it in the sense of on one side of the video there's a huge sign that kind of obscures that whole area. But the rest of the video, does it fairly and accurately depict what you were able to see?
Correct.
So, Your Honor, we would offer what's been marked as Exhibit 11.
Any objection?
Sidebar, Your Honor.
Yeah. All right, 11 is received.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start showing Exhibit 11. And I'm going to let it run for about 15 seconds, and then I'm going to pause it, okay? All right, so if you could do that, please. All right, so I'm going to ask to pause it right here. Now, as I said, other than cutting out the big sign on the right side, does this fairly depict what you were able to see when you looked up at the screens on May 25th of 2020 regarding this incident?
Correct.
And you said when you first saw it, there were no officers. Now we obviously have seen some officers walking into view. Were you still able to watch it when they did walk into view?
I was in and out of this video, so I do not remember them walking to the car.
All right. And what do you remember, seeing the next time that you looked up?
I believe they were getting into the back of the squad car.
All right. And do you remember then the next time that you were able to see it, generally what was depicted?
I believe they were still trying to get into the back of the squad car. It was moving a little bit, and then I went back to my screens.
And I think what I'd like to do is have this run, and if you could just watch the video and tell the jurors, when you were able to look up what parts that you remember seeing that day during your shift, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I believe this is close to where I started watching.
So obviously you can see some police officers here. Did you recognize them individually?
No. And then I know I didn't watch that much, and then the next time I looked, they were opening the door. I do remember that.
Okay. Which door do you mean?
The driver's side back seat. This is what I remember seeing.
And so for the record, we see the officers now trying to put Mr. Floyd into the back seat, correct?
Correct.
The timestamp on the top, for the record, reflects about 8:17 and 10 seconds when you said that, approximately.
Yes.
Now the officers have opened a rear passenger door. Do you remember seeing this part of the video?
Yes. I remember seeing the squad move.
And what do you mean by move?
So like now you can see the squad is moving back and forth.
It's not like being driven, but moving back and forth.
Right.
And for the record now, the timestamp at the top is 8:17:50 approximately.
And I know I wasn't able to watch all of this.
So at some point here, you had to turn away and do your job.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you remember what was the next thing you remember seeing?
The next time I remember looking up is they had moved from the back of the squad to the ground.
Right. And so when you see that, let me know and we'll just make a reference to it at that time, okay?
Okay. I don't exactly know when they moved to the ground. I just know that when I looked up,
Right.
we were no longer in the back seat.
Because you've told us that you remember seeing them on the ground with him, I want you to point out the time in the video that looks familiar to what you remember seeing when you say that you saw them on the ground with him, just so that we know, okay?
Okay. I believe this is when I started watching again.
So for the record, the timestamp at the top reflects 8:19:25. So this is what you mean by them having him on the ground.
Correct.
Do you recall how long you were able to watch around this time?
No, honestly, I was in and out of looking at the cameras and then going back to my screens to make sure I wasn't missing anything, added remarks, getting out calls, and then would go back to the screen again.
Now, and actually I think what I'll do is just pause it here. After seeing this, at some point, then did you look back to the screen?
To back to working?
No, back to this video of the
Yes,
scene.
I was in and out of looking at this screen and then my work.
And at some point
screens.
then, did you go back to this and how did it appear at that time when you went back to it?
It had not changed.
And what do you mean by that?
They were still on the ground. The whole situation was still the same.
Had there been other changes to the scene? Were there other people in the...
I didn't pay attention to the surroundings of what was going on. I just know that they hadn't moved.
All right. But at some point, did you see other citizens in the video?
I cannot remember seeing them. I just remembered looking up and seeing that the situation hadn't changed.
Do you recall approximately how long that was?
No, It was long enough. It was long enough that I could look back multiple times.
And so when you did look back, still on the ground, like depicted here, essentially.
Correct.
And what did you think about this when you looked back and saw that it hadn't changed?
I first asked if the screens had frozen
Why did you ask that?
because it hadn't changed.
Okay. And did you find that it had frozen?
No.
How did
Well,
you
I
know?
was told that it was not frozen.
Did you see the screen change yourself?
Yes, I saw the person's moving.
So what did you start thinking at that point?
Something might be wrong.
Why?
We don't get these videos often, or, video at all, unless it's looking at the bridge or just looking at people walking. We very rarely get incidents where police are actively on a scene. And they had changed. They had come from the back of the squad to the ground, and my instincts were telling me that something's wrong. Something is not right. I don't know what, but something wasn't right.
In what ways were you thinking that something was not right?
It was an extended period of time. Again, I can't tell you the exact amount of time. And they hadn't told me if they needed any more resources. It's a multitude of different things that ran through my brain, but I became concerned that something might be wrong.
Wrong with what? What are you thinking?
It was a gut instinct of, in the incident, something's not going right. Whether it be they needed more assistance, or if there just something wasn't right. I don't know how to explain it. It was a gut instinct to tell me that now we can be concerned.
And what did you decide to do?
I took that instinct and I called the sergeant.
And do you recall who the sergeant was that you talked to?
It was Sergeant Kluger.
And why did you call a sergeant?
The sergeant is the police officer's supervisor.
You're not a Minneapolis police officer.
No.
You haven't gone through like the use of force training.
No.
But in your experience, you felt something was wrong here that a sergeant needed to know about.
Correct. If this was a form of use of force, I was calling to let them know.
Why would you involve a sergeant in a call that might involve the use of force?
Sergeants are usually always notified for use of force.
And so did you in fact call Sergeant Kluger?
I did.
Have you ever in your career before called a sergeant for something like this?
Multiple. For an incident like this?
Right.
To be exact, no.
Okay. Where you had this instinct and felt something was wrong and you needed to call a sergeant about it. Have you ever had that incident or that situation before this incident?
If something was wrong with a call, yes. And not, I don't know how to say this, not if, I can call the sergeant for anything because they are a resource, and if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But I can call them regarding calls if something doesn't look right in a call, if there's a caution note, if there's something that they can do beyond the scope of the call, I can call them.
And have you had a chance to listen to a recording of that call you actually made?
Yes.
And that recording is made as part of the business of the call center, records that traffic.
Everything's recorded.
All right. And we played a recording of that for you previously.
Yes.
And was it an accurate recording of your call?
Yes.
And we've now marked that as Exhibit 12. In Your Honor, we would offer Exhibit 12.
No objection.
12 was received.
And at this time, we'll play that call, all right?
2030-44, May 25, 2020.
Hey, this is Jenna with Channel 1. Hey, what's up? Hey, so, just wanted to let you know about the person with a knife at 2602 Bloomington. And then, I didn't know, you can call me a snitch if you want to, but we have the cameras up for 320's call. Oh, did they already put him in the, they must have already started moving him. And 320 over at Cup Foods.
Okay.
I don't know if they had used force or not. They got something out of the back of the squad, and all of them sat on this man. So I don't know if they needed you or not, but they haven't said anything to me yet.
Yeah, they haven't said anything. This was just a takedown, which doesn't count, but
Okay.
I'll find out.
No problem. We don't get to ever see it, so when we see it, we're just like, well, that looks
Okay.
a little different. All right, thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Sounds good. Bye.
2031-33, May 25, 2020.
So I'm going to walk through that just a little bit. At the very beginning, you spoke kind of fast and you identified yourself. You just described for the jury what you were saying there.
I told him my name was Jenna and that I was Channel 1 dispatch.
So that's meaning the dispatch for 3rd Precinct.
Correct.
And then you talked about something involving a knife. Is that related to this case at all?
No.
That was from some other call?
Correct.
And then you used the term snitch.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
At that moment, it was a word that just came out of my mouth, but it's out of the scope of my duties to call a sergeant if there was any use of force.
And so that's what the purpose, well, tell me, what was the purpose of making that call to him and giving him that information?
Voicing my concerns. Like I said, we don't see incidents. My job is mainly all listening.
And by the time you made that call, you said something to Sergeant Pleager about, oh, did they take him already? By the time you made that call, were you still able to see the video from the street camera?
Yes, the video was still up.
And what did you see at the time that you were making that call?
That nobody was there.
So you were aware an ambulance had come to the scene,
Yes,
but the ambulance was not in the video at that time.
correct.
So is that the reason why you made a reference to them being gone?
Yes, so I was speaking to the rest of my team over there and asking a question to them while still on the phone with the sergeant.
So probably a better time for me to ask this question, but have you ever, prior to that date, made a call like that to a sergeant
No,
in your job? Your Honor, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson, should we take our lunch break or would you like to do short cross-examination?
No, I think we should take our lunch break.
All right.
If there is one that I'd like to discuss with counsel on the court.
All right. Members of the jury, we'll take our lunch break. Lunches should be delivered to your room soon, so we'll see you at 1:30. All right, be seated. All right, you can be seated. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just I'm noting for the record that with respect to the exhibit containing the milestone cameras, I have not previously seen the redacted or edited version of that, and I think this may come up a few times during the course of this trial. Even the CAD report was redacted. So I don't know how, for cross-examination, my copies of these exhibits are different from what's being admitted. And so my concern is I'm asking the court to either instruct the state to give me copies of these redacted things so I can control them, or to utilize the state in terms of pulling some of these things up for cross-examination.
Okay. Mr. Frank, Mr. Slisher.
If I may, Your Honor, anticipating that, I've asked that a drive be prepared. Hopefully we'll be able to deliver that to counsel over the noon hour to have exactly what he's requesting.
All right. All right. Anything else for the record before we take our lunch break?
Not for the state thing.
All right, we're in recess until 1:30.